A few minutes, or 10 minutes or so left. Take a question from Simon Marshall, please. Simon Marshall.
Do fathers have the right to equal access to their children once they divorce?
Do fathers have the right to equal access to the children once they're divorced? And this is because of a report which has just come out, which says that no legislation should be introduced that allows a parental right to shared or equal time for both parents. It was a question about the role of the fathers when families split up. And the report said that there should be no legislation creating a risk of a perception as a parental right. Benjamin Zephaniah.
I'm not quite sure if I understand this. So the father does not have the right...
Statutory right, equal with the mother.
We can't keep telling fathers to have equal responsibility and not give them equal rights.
Okay. Theresa May, is this going to be adopted by the government, this idea?
I can't say whether it's only come out today. I can't say whether we will adopt that particular part of the proposals. This is a report by David Norgrove. It was commissioned by the last government. It's been reported
by you,
us.
Was it?
This is an issue that has caused concern for members of Parliament across the House, in all parties, for some considerable time. In fact, there are some issues in there that I know we will be wanting to take on, which are things like speeding up the care process. But one of the things that I've been concerned about for some time, and when I spoke for the party on family policy when we were in opposition, I very much thought that there should be actually a legal presumption of shared parenting. I think there should be more emphasis on mediation, because what happens when couples split up and when children are involved, sadly, we see bitter disputes going through the courts. It's an adversarial system. I don't think it actually does the best for anybody, and certainly not for the children who are involved. So mediation up front, and I'd like to see there's been some very good work in parts of the United States and Australia.
All right, well, let's stick with
shared parenting plans.
Yes, the woman there in the second row.
I just wanted to ask, what would happen, say, a lot of the times when mothers move to different countries with their children, what would you propose to kind of make sure that fathers also get a chance to custody if the child is in a different country?
Well, Ed Ball says that he called for this report in your capacity as...
Children's Secretary.
Children's Secretary. And what do you make of this particular clause in Norgrove's review?
Well, this is a complex legal matter, and I'm not a lawyer. I did commission the report precisely because I was worried about these issues around fathers' access and grandparents' access too. And in the interim report, as I understand it, Mr. Norgrove did say he wanted to look at the issue of having a legal right for fathers. And then he went and studied some of the international experience, in particular the Australian experience, where this was done 5 or 6 years ago. And the result was, of establishing the legal right, is there was a huge increase in the number of child custody cases which moved from mediation into long protracted court battles, and therefore it made it more likely, as I understand the report, you'd end up with legal battles which are very damaging for children rather than being sorted out through mediation. So when the Home Secretary says she wants more mediation, I think Norgrove is saying that is exactly why you should make sure you change the culture of the courts and the way in which our processes operate. But if you simply go for changing the legislation, you actually move away from mediation and back into children being badly damaged in court processes. As I said, it's a complex area, but we don't want our kids being dragged through long court battles. So I think that's why he's made the recommendation he has.
All right. OK, you...
It shouldn't be about the sex of the parent, it should be the content of the character.
The character?
Well, I think it should be about the best interest of the child.
And the woman at the back there, but there is this issue about fathers finding it more difficult to have access, isn't there? The woman at the back there, yes.
I'm sorry, but there definitely maybe should be a move towards more mediation, but the fact that if you're making it harder for a court case to come into power, sometimes children need that, sometimes mediation is completely out of the question, and one of the parents is abusive or, is not actually able to look after a child.
All right. And the woman there? You? Me? Yes?
Yes, the powers that be seem to fall over themselves to apply human rights and equality to different sections of society, but why can't they give divorced fathers the same courtesy?
Peter Hitchens.
Well, of course fathers ought to have the freedom to see their children, but in practice it won't work out that way. There's a huge mass of case law since the 1969 divorce law reform, which makes it harder and harder for fathers both to have custody of the children and indeed to have any say in the disposition of the property of the broken marriage. The real question here is not in the arrangements you make after a divorce, but in the fact that we have a disastrous divorce law. I think another part of the Norgrove report actually speaks of making it possible to begin a divorce now on the internet. Divorce in this country is far too easy. It's easier to break up a marriage in this country than it is to get out of a car leasing agreement. And this was an arrangement we made in the 1960s when we thought it would be a tremendous liberation for adults trapped in unhappy marriages. Well, it may well have been such a thing, but the problem is the people who paid the price of that were the now millions of children who've been the victims of their parents divorcing. And it doesn't matter what sort of arrangements you make for custody or child support or anything else. Every time a marriage breaks up, the children suffer. It is time we re-examined the divorce reforms of the 1960s and realised that at the very least the divorce law should distinguish between parents with children and parents who don't have any. They've been immensely cruel and disastrous for children. Great for selfish adults, not so good for children. Time we reformed it.
Shirley Williams. Shirley Williams.
Well,
briefly, if you would.
No, very briefly. I mean, I think it's absolutely right for the report to say that the primary issue should be the welfare of the child. I think that we are selfish in many ways in seeing children as secondary to the interests of adults. In that sense, I've got some sympathy with what Peter said. I think we have to now face up to the fact that the UNICEF and other people find that British children are among the most unhappy in the Western world. We have to address that, and we should address that. And I think that in that respect, both Teresa and Ed are right to say that this report is an attempt to get it right.
Okay, thank you. And we've just got time, since you mentioned happiness, for a question.